Hey, welcome to Black Justice Chronicles, where each story is a revolution of truth and resilience. Get ready for a journey that celebrates the power of justice. Comment down below where you're watching from and don't forget to like and subscribe if you hate Karen. It was a Tuesday, objectively one of the dullest days in existence, and all I, Miles Thomas, wanted was to fill up my beloved car and get on with my day. My ride is a steel gray 1969 Charger, a classic American muscle machine that I've painstakingly rebuilt from the engine block up. I'm well aware of the stereotypes swirling around someone like me owning such a vintage beast, but I couldn't care less. Each rivet, each layer of paint, each polished detail, I poured my heart into every inch of that car. The sun beat down mercilessly as I pulled into a local pit stop just off Interstate 95. I grabbed the nozzle, started pumping premium fuel, and let my mind wander to the usual array of responsibilities waiting for me later. That's when she rolled in, her glossy SUV shimmering like it had just driven straight out of a commercial break. At first glance, I thought maybe she was lost. Or perhaps just really into flaunting her wheels. But something about her posture, the way she practically vibrated with entitlement, told me this wasn't going to be a run-of-the-mill encounter. I've seen Karen in the wild before, flashes of the archetype in memes and internet jokes, but this woman took it to another level. I'd learn her name eventually, but right then, all I saw was a high-maintenance presence stepping out of her SUV. Imagine meticulously teased platinum blonde hair, a hint of a fake tan verging on neon, and sunglasses that looked more suited for industrial welding than a quick stop for gas. She strutted around like she was the star of a reality show, her designer purse swinging like a judge's gavel. When her gaze finally locked onto me, it held all the warmth of a broken heater. "Excuse me," she snapped, her tone thick with the condescension you'd expect from someone who thinks the world's sole purpose is to cater to them. "You do realize you're hogging prime space here? Some of us have places to be." I gave a silent sigh. The fuel pump indicated I was nearly done, and there were at least half a dozen other open spots. "Ma'am," I began calmly, "I'm just finishing up. I'll be out of your way in a minute." She squinted at my Charger like it was a stray dog that had wandered onto her manicured lawn. "It's just, suspicious," she drawled. "A person like you, driving that kind of car." That lingering pause told me everything I needed to know. Suspicious. The single word hung between us, thick and pungent. I could practically feel the judgments funneling into her brain. I'd dealt with folks like this before, so I resisted the urge to roll my eyes right into the back of my skull. Instead, I kept my composure, hoping maybe, just maybe, she'd let it go. She didn't. I watched as her manicured hand tightened around her phone like a vulture's talon. In that split second, I had the sinking feeling that this encounter, on an otherwise uneventful Tuesday, was about to become far more complicated than I'd ever anticipated. My heart thudded like a misfiring piston as I watched Sabrina Aldridge lift her phone with swift precision. The shimmering heat of Highway 77 felt even more oppressive. I'd gone from leisurely fueling my Charger to bracing for whatever wild accusation she might unload on me. She turned slightly, speaking in a voice loud enough for me, and half the station, to overhear. "Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious individual with a questionable vehicle. Steel gray Charger, older model. Plate number." She squinted at my license plate, rattling off the digits with smug satisfaction. I took a quick glance around. A couple of travelers in line at the convenience store had paused to gawk, wide-eyed at the commotion. The station attendant behind the window seemed torn between ignoring the drama and stepping out to intervene. Meanwhile, Sabrina radiated self-importance, shoulders thrust back and chin raised as though calling the authorities was her divine right. A wave of indignation spread through me, but I fought to keep my expression neutral. I'd learned long ago that escalating a confrontation rarely helps. "Ma'am," I said, measuring my words, "you can't just accuse someone of theft because you don't like the way they look or the car they drive." She huffed, snapping her phone shut with an air of triumph. "We'll see about that. I'm just being a concerned citizen." Seconds later, I heard the dispatch crackle through the station's PA system. Someone had likely alerted the manager that the police were on their way. My chest tightened. Even if I had nothing to hide, having law enforcement roll up could quickly become a nightmare. I'd seen enough situations spiral out of control based on a few well-placed assumptions. Sabrina parked her massive Titan SUV at an odd angle, as if blocking me in. She kept glancing back at me with a smug grin. I tried to ignore her, fiddling with the pump to finalize my transaction. Inside, though, my thoughts raced. Would the officers believe me? Would they see how baseless her accusations were? When I finally finished fueling, I considered driving off. But that might look suspicious, even though it shouldn't have. And if the police arrived to find me gone, Sabrina would undoubtedly spin it into proof of my guilt. So I exhaled a slow, steady breath, hung up the nozzle, and leaned against my Charger. By the time the flashing lights cut through the midday glare, I'd convinced myself to stay calm no matter what. A county patrol car turned off the highway into the station, dust kicking up around its tires. 2 officers stepped out. One, a tall man with a no-nonsense demeanor, approached me while the other, a shorter woman with sharp eyes, zeroed in on Sabrina. The tall officer, Officer Richards, I would later learn, raised a brow. "We got a call about a potential stolen vehicle. Mind if we see your license and registration?" I could feel my jaw tighten, but I forced a polite nod. "Of course. Let me grab them." Reaching carefully into my back pocket for my wallet, I handed over my ID, then stepped to the driver's side door to retrieve the registration from the glove compartment. Every move I made was deliberate, slow enough to show I wasn't hiding anything, but not so slow as to look theatrical. My heart pounded all the same. As Officer Richards examined my documents, the second officer, Officer Carter, spoke with Sabrina. Their hushed voices drifted over as I caught snippets of her version of events. "He looked shady, the car is far too expensive for someone like," the rest was drowned out by my own rising anger. Officer Richards returned my paperwork, lips pressed in a thin line. "Okay, Ethan Caldwell," he said. "Everything matches so far. But we do need to verify the vehicle identification number, just standard procedure." He glanced at the Charger, where the VIN was stamped. "Is that okay?" "Go ahead," I said, stepping aside. Sabrina watched from a short distance, arms folded, a smirk still playing on her lips. I couldn't help noticing how her posture softened for a moment, like she expected some vindication was coming. She probably thought the VIN would reveal I'd stolen the car from someone else. Little did she know, I'd kept every scrap of paper associated with the restoration, not to mention the official purchase records. Officer Carter joined us, wiping her brow in the heat. She glanced at the license plate, then at me. "We just want to make sure everything's in order, sir," she said, her tone apologetic. "We have to follow up on any call like this." I nodded, swallowing the retort on my tongue. I understood they had a job to do. The real source of my frustration stood a few feet away, arms crossed over her designer top, phone at the ready for who knew what next stunt. Minutes later, Officer Richards rubbed his chin. "VIN checks out. Registration's valid. It's all under your name." Sabrina's smile faltered, her face flushing. "That's impossible," she stuttered, taken aback. "He must have doctored something." Officer Carter exhaled. "Ma'am, there's no evidence of any wrongdoing here. Mr. Caldwell's papers are legitimate." The sense of relief flooding me was immense, though my anger remained. I looked at Sabrina, her composure unraveling. "I told you," I said softly, "this car is mine." Officer Richards slipped my documents back into my hand, a half-apologetic look crossing his features. The tension in the air was palpable, made worse by the thick August heat that clung to every surface at Frontier Fuel Station. Sabrina Aldridge still stood rigidly near her pearl-white Titan SUV, the plastic gleam of its exterior as over-the-top as her designer sunglasses. The final confirmation, that I had indeed purchased and restored the 1969 Charger legally, seemed to have stolen the wind from her sails. She blinked, the corners of her mouth twitching with disbelief. "This isn't right," she insisted. "He can't. I mean, look at him and look at that vehicle." Officer Carter shot her a hard stare. "Ma'am, are you accusing Mr. Caldwell of anything else? Because so far, all the information we have says he owns this car outright." Her voice was firm but not unkind. Still, it was clear the officer's patience was waning. Sabrina's eyes darted between me and the Charger, as though trying to conjure some new angle to justify her accusations. She opened her mouth to protest, then clamped it shut. An odd silence blanketed the station. The bystanders who'd been watching from afar returned to pumping gas or heading into the store, evidently deciding the show was over. "Ma'am," Officer Richard said, "filing a false report wastes police resources and puts innocent people in tense situations. Perhaps an apology is in order here." Her face flushed a deeper shade of red, and for a split second, I thought she might lash out at the officers. Instead, she exhaled a single, abrupt breath, then gave me a look that could curdle milk. "I apologize if there was a misunderstanding." Her tone was as flat as the dusty pavement beneath our feet. I sensed how forced the words were, but I had no intention of making this any uglier. "Sure," I said, pocketing my papers. "Apology accepted." Officer Carter seemed satisfied. She turned to me. "Mr. Caldwell, if you have any additional concerns, you can reach us at the county precinct. Otherwise, you're free to go." I nodded, my pulse finally beginning to slow. The officers headed back to their cruiser, leaving Sabrina and me in an awkward, silent standoff. She looked ready to spit fire, but without police backup, she didn't have a leg to stand on. And that was when a strange flicker of recognition tugged at the back of my mind. Something about her face, or maybe her voice, triggered a half-formed memory. I'd never met Sabrina Aldrich before, of that I was certain, but there was a nagging sense that I'd crossed paths with something related to her, some time ago. My eyes narrowed slightly, but I couldn't place it. Sabrina turned on her heel, marched to her SUV, and fumbled with her keys. The engine roared to life, and she shot me one final poisonous glare before peeling out onto the road with a squeal of tires. The dust kicked up behind her in a tawny cloud, drifting across the station lot until it finally settled. For a long minute, I just stood there, trying to wrap my head around what had happened. The abruptness of it all left me wired, my hands shaking from the residual adrenaline. It's not every day you're publicly accused of grand theft auto in broad daylight. Needing a moment to decompress, I headed into the station's cramped convenience shop for a cold drink. The air conditioning blasted over me as I walked in, and the cashier, a thin, middle-aged fellow with a sympathetic grin, nodded in acknowledgement. "Saw the whole thing," he murmured, counting change for another customer. "Some folks just look for trouble, don't they?" I couldn't help but smile wryly. "Yeah, they do." Grabbing a lemonade from the cooler, I paid and tried to let the cool sip wash away the ugly aftertaste of the confrontation. But my mind kept returning to that persistent hint of recognition. Something about Sabrina Aldrich was nagging at me. I wandered closer to a rack of local magazines near the cashier, scanning the covers for any sign of a distraction. My gaze skimmed past pictures of scenic beaches and farmland. Then it landed on an annual philanthropic gala issue. The glossy cover showed a swirl of designer gowns, tuxedos, and forced smiles under glittering chandeliers. And there, right in the background, was a familiar face, Sabrina. The half-hidden photo captured her mid-laugh, dressed in some formal, sequined attire. It wasn't Sabrina herself that made my heart lurch, though. It was the man next to her. He had a receding hairline, a certain brand of smugness etched into his expression. I recognized him instantly. Rory, the Hawk Aldrich, a scam artist I'd tangled with briefly back in college. And if memory served, he was a name the authorities had been trying to pin down for years. I almost dropped my lemonade when I spotted Rory, the hawk, Aldrich in that photo. Suddenly, Sabrina's wild aggression made a twisted sort of sense. She wasn't just some random person with a chip on her shoulder. She was connected to a man I knew all too well, a man whose shady history had once caused quite a stir in my life. Back in college, Rory had been notorious for roping gullible students into elaborate, investment opportunities that turned out to be well-disguised pyramid schemes. He charmed his way into campus social circles, always touting big dreams of financial freedom, but I'd caught wind of his true colors when he tried to recruit me. Being a business major with half a clue, I saw through his flashy charts and phony success stories. I'd reported him to campus authorities for forging documents to maintain his enrollment. He vanished before they could fully investigate. Now he was in a glossy magazine spread, looking entirely at ease alongside Sabrina. According to the caption, the event was a high-profile charity function last summer in Harbor City, a place known for upscale fundraisers and well-to-do benefactors. My mind raced. If Sabrina was married to Rory, or at least closely connected, then maybe the hostility she'd shown me was about more than just a fancy muscle car. Perhaps she recognized me from pictures or a memory Rory had shared. That might explain why she seemed so certain I shouldn't own my prized charger. I paid for the magazine, rummaging for loose bills in my pocket, then tucked it under my arm. Outside, the sun still beat down on my charger, dust-free and gleaming despite the earlier confrontation. I threw the drink on the passenger seat, hopped in, and slammed the door. My adrenaline flared anew. Could it really be that fate had just thrown me back into the orbit of Rory Aldrich? As I started the engine, I pictured Rory's slick grin and half-lidded eyes from years ago. He'd boasted about unstoppable business ventures, overseas expansions, and guaranteed returns. Meanwhile, every rumor and campus whisper painted him as a cunning swindler who left a trail of debt and empty promises. If he'd continued that life after college, there was a good chance he was in deeper trouble now, possibly on the run, or in hiding under different aliases. I couldn't help a smile curving my lips. Could Sabrina's meltdown have unwittingly opened a door to reveal her connection to a wanted con artist? It felt almost too coincidental to be true. Shifting gears, I pulled out of Frontier fuel station and headed for the main road. My plan had been to continue north for a dinner appointment, but I found my mind too restless for polite conversation. Instead, I detoured to a quieter side road, parked under the shade of an old oak tree, and flipped through the magazine more thoroughly. A few pages in, I found another photograph of Sabrina, this time with an event sponsor. Her name was clearly listed as Sabrina Aldrich, and beside her, in a small text box, was a mention that she hailed from a wealthy family known for real estate dealings in Harbor City. I recalled how, in the final days before Rory vanished from campus, he talked about hooking a significant backer, someone with the money to bankroll his next big scheme. Could Sabrina's family have been that connection? My foot tapped against the charger's floor. I was no detective, but curiosity gnawed at me. If Rory, the hawk Aldrich was indeed still active, I wouldn't mind seeing him face some long-overdue reckoning. In my mind, I pictured how arrogant he'd been, bragging about never leaving a paper trail. But here he was, on glossy display, literally next to Sabrina at a local charity event. Irony at its finest. A part of me considered just driving on, forgetting the entire fiasco. Life would be simpler that way. Yet something about the day's events, the shock of Sabrina's accusation, the memory of Rory's old stunts, made me want to dig deeper. Whether it was righteous payback or just a sense of closure, I felt compelled to do something. Steeling myself, I turned the key again and guided the charger back onto the highway. First, I'd need more information on Rory's current status. If I could confirm he was still wanted by the authorities, then this chance encounter might be the perfect opportunity to blow his cover. The drive felt surreal, like I'd been thrust into some amateur sleuth story I never volunteered to join. Every so often, the memory of Sabrina's scornful expression flashed in my mind, her brazen certainty I had no right to own my own car. Then my thoughts shifted to Rory, the hawk Aldrich, that old campus con man who disappeared before justice could catch up. I couldn't help but wonder if Sabrina and Rory were partners in more ways than one, maybe fueling each other's sense of superiority. As the Charger rumbled down the freeway, I decided a visit to Riverbridge Police Department might be in order. It wasn't far off my route, and if Rory had an active warrant, the local authorities could confirm it. I wasn't expecting a hero's welcome, but it felt like the logical next step. Before making any accusations, I wanted my facts straight. I pulled into the station's visitor lot and killed the engine. The building wasn't large, a modest brick exterior with tinted windows, an American flag flapping out front. Inside, a blast of cool air greeted me as I stepped up to a service desk manned by a bored-looking clerk, who arched an eyebrow when I approached. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I hope so," I said, sliding the magazine onto the counter, flipped open to the photo of Rory Aldrich. "I have reason to believe this man might be wanted under another name. He goes by Rory Aldrich, sometimes nicknamed the Hawk. Do you have anything on him?" The clerk studied the page briefly, then nodded. "Give me a minute." He disappeared behind a partition lined with filing cabinets. Meanwhile, I rocked on my heels, half expecting someone to dismiss me as a crank. A few uneasy minutes later, the clerk returned with a folder. "We do have a record on a Rory Aldrich," he confirmed quietly. "He's been on a statewide watch list for fraud, embezzlement, and illegal financial schemes. Last official notice was about 5 years back. There's suspicion he relocated to Florida under an alias. No verified sightings recently." My pulse kicked up a notch. Sabrina's magazine photo was from a Harbor City charity event just last summer. That was definitely more recent than 5 years. Does it say anything about his spouse or known associates? I pressed. The clerk flipped through a few pages. "Wife's name unknown, but he's rumored to associate with wealthy families. That's about all we've got. If you have new info, I can get you in touch with a detective." I exhaled. "Sure, let's do that." He scribbled down a phone number on a sticky note. "Call Detective Ramos tomorrow morning, she's the one who handles old fraud cases." He paused, glancing at the magazine again. "If that's him, it's a big deal. Could help close a long-standing investigation." I thanked him and left the station, folder in hand. My mind spun with questions. Had Sabrina's family essentially funded Rory's schemes? Was she an accomplice, or just another victim dazzled by his charm? Her hostility toward me hinted she was far from innocent. Then again, maybe she was just ignorant and arrogant, someone who believed her circle was beyond reproach. Sliding into my Charger, I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel. If Sabrina's meltdown had inadvertently led me to this discovery, I needed to see it through. The last time I'd encountered Rory, it ended with him slipping away, leaving behind a line of defrauded classmates. Now, there might be a real chance to rectify that, if I played my cards right. I drove to a quiet diner a few blocks away. A slice of pie and a cup of coffee sounded like the perfect way to calm my nerves. In a corner booth, phone on the table, I flipped through the notes in the folder. Rory's rap sheet was extensive: suspected money laundering, Ponzi-like investments, even forging official documents. Reading it reminded me of the smooth talker I'd met in college, except now, his crimes had grown bolder. I took a bite of apple pie, mulling over how best to contact Detective Ramos. If I blindsided her, she might just see me as a busybody. I wanted to present something concrete: a date, an event location, photographic proof. That magazine gave me a potential lead. The charity's name and date. If that fundraiser was in Harbor City, maybe the city or the nonprofit posted pictures online. More photos could strengthen the case, tying Rory's presence to a specific place and time. Swiping through my phone, I typed "Harbor City Summer Gala" into a search engine. Sure enough, I found a smattering of local news photos, guests sipping cocktails under chandeliers. After a few scrolls, I spotted Sabrina and Rory in more images. So it wasn't a fluke shot, they'd been openly attending high society events together. As I gazed at the pictures, an unexpected sense of satisfaction washed over me. Sabrina Aldridge had tried to shame me at a gas station, only to point me toward the man whose downfall I'd love to witness. Sometimes karma works in unusual ways. By the time I wrapped up at the diner, I'd assembled enough scraps of information to feel cautiously optimistic. Sabrina Aldridge was undoubtedly connected to Rory, the Hawk Aldridge, and he was undeniably wanted. I had the name of Detective Ramos, who specialized in fraud cases. The question was how to proceed without risking my own safety. If Sabrina or Rory realized I was onto them, they might retaliate, especially if their shady dealings extended beyond just forging documents. I fired off a brief email to the address I'd found online for Detective Ramos's office, attaching a few relevant photos from the magazine and the local news site. I left out mention of the confrontation at Frontier Fuel Station, focusing instead on the bigger picture, a known fugitive popping up at a public gala. I closed the email with an offer to provide any further details if needed. Stepping outside, I found the late afternoon sun turning the sky into a mosaic of gold and pink. I hopped in my Charger and decided it was time for a bit of normalcy. The day had been consumed by drama, but I still needed to check in with a friend I was supposed to meet earlier. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a message from her, "Everything okay? Haven't heard from you." I typed a quick reply, "Long story. I'm good. We'll call soon." Then pulled back onto the highway, feeling the Charger's engine rumble beneath my feet. There's something comforting about the steady hum of a well-tuned motor. It drowned out the background noise in my head, letting me focus on the road ahead. About 30 minutes later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. I felt a spike of anxiety. Could Sabrina have somehow gotten my number? After everything that happened, it wouldn't shock me if she tried to harass me further. Still, I answered. "Hello. Is this Ethan Caldwell?" a crisp voice asked. "My name is Detective Julia Ramos, Riverbridge PD. I just received your email. I wanted to confirm a few details." Relief flooded through me. "Yes, Detective. Thanks for calling back so soon. I wasn't sure if you'd even see my message until tomorrow." "You provided some interesting photos," she said, her tone measured. "Rory Aldridge has been on our radar for years. If the images you sent are recent, that could mean he's still operating under his real name, or at least not hiding it in every circle." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "That's what I gathered. The event was last summer, but it's more recent than any official record I found. I suspect Sabrina Aldridge is his wife or partner." Detective Ramos let out a thoughtful hum. "We don't have a spouse listed in our files. We knew he was wooing some well-off investors, though. This might be the missing link. Were you able to find anything else, addresses, business affiliations, anything beyond the photographs?" I hesitated. "Nothing concrete yet, just the magazine coverage. But the local news site credits Sabrina with significant philanthropic ties in Harbor City. She may be bankrolling him. Or at least turning a blind eye." "Understood," the detective replied. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, do you have any reason to believe your personal safety is at risk?" The question made me pause. Sabrina's fury had been intense, but she hadn't physically threatened me, just attempted to embarrass me at the gas station. Rory, on the other hand, was a different story. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Sabrina confronted me earlier, but she doesn't know I recognized Rory. She might suspect something if she realized I was in that store, buying that magazine." Detective Ramos's tone took on a note of caution. "Don't do anything rash. Keep a low profile. If you see them again or learn something new, contact me immediately. We've been trying to bring Rory Aldridge in for a long time." After we wrapped up the call, I stared at my phone, a mixture of nervousness and determination pulsing through me. Sabrina's ugly stunt at the gas station might end up leading to Rory's capture, and that was a silver lining I never saw coming. If all went well, they'd both have to answer for their actions, Sabrina for her complicity and Rory for his extensive scams. I pulled into the parking lot of a roadside cafe, deciding I needed another break. Inside, the soft hum of conversation and the comforting smell of coffee grounded me. I sipped a latte by the window, imagining how the next few days might unfold. Would the police descend on Sabrina's estate, rifles at the ready? Or would Rory sense the net closing in and flee? Uncertainty gnawed at me, but a glimmer of hope persisted. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of their downfall, and I was in a unique position to help see it through. A few days passed in a strange limbo. I kept my routine as normal as possible. Work, errands, the occasional dinner with friends, while discreetly checking my phone for updates from Detective Ramos. Each time the phone buzzed, I half expected it to be her, announcing they'd tracked down Rory, the Hawk Aldrich. But no call came, and no new emails appeared. It felt like the calm before a storm. One afternoon, while reorganizing some receipts in my living room, a blocked number flashed on my screen. My gut twisted with apprehension. I wondered if it might be Sabrina. Or worse, Rory. Bracing myself, I answered. Hello. A low, tense hiss came from the other end. You think you're clever, don't you? My pulse jolted. That voice, unmistakably Sabrina Aldrich. I'm sorry, who is this? You know exactly who, she snapped. Sabrina. I got your name from the officer who showed up at Frontier Fuel Station. The one I called when I thought you were a thief. I clenched my jaw, realizing that she must have demanded the report or discovered my name in a police log. What do you want, Ms. Aldrich? You lied to the police, and you lied to me, Sabrina spat, her words venomous. I know you've been snooping around, going to the station and showing pictures of me. You meddling busybody. How did you? My sources, she interrupted. Don't worry about that. I just want you to know you're making a big mistake. Stay out of my business. For a moment, anger warred with caution. She had no idea how deep my suspicions ran, or that I was coordinating with Detective Ramos. I'm not interested in your personal affairs, I said evenly. But if your partner is a wanted fraudster, the police have a right to know. A brief silence crackled over the line. Then came a half laugh, half sneer. You're playing a dangerous game, Ethan Caldwell. Rory has powerful connections, and I'm not exactly helpless myself. Her threat was hardly subtle. Still, I refused to rise to the bait. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried about me, or the police. She let out a scoffing noise. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Don't say I didn't warn you. Then the line went dead. I sank onto my couch, heart pounding. Sabrina's ominous tone clung to my thoughts like a toxic residue. Clearly, she was monitoring who came sniffing around her life. Maybe she caught wind of my visit to Riverbridge PD. It confirmed one thing: she was deeply involved in Rory's affairs, enough to be spooked by anyone who asked questions. Unsure what else to do, I composed a text to Detective Ramos, summarizing the call. Just got a threatening phone call from Sabrina Aldrich. She knows I contacted you. Please advise if I should take additional precautions. I read it over twice, then hit send. The remainder of the day dragged by. I checked the locks on my windows and doors more often than I'd like to admit. My Charger still sat in the driveway, shining and innocent, as though it hadn't been the catalyst for this entire nightmare. I tried to concentrate on work, but my mind kept drifting to worst-case scenarios. Early evening brought a reply from Detective Ramos, noted. We've increased surveillance on Sabrina Aldrich's property. If you feel unsafe, you can request police protection. We'll keep you updated. I breathed a shaky sigh of relief. At least I wasn't completely alone in this. I had the police on my side, or as much as they could be, given the limited resources of a mid-sized department. Later that night, as I tried to wind down with a book, a million questions swirled in my head. What if Rory figured out I was the reason the police were closing in? Would he try to cut a deal? Or would Sabrina double down to protect him, turning her wrath on me? She'd already proven she wasn't above hurling baseless accusations and summoning the cops to do her bidding. I set the book aside, gave up on reading. Instead, I gazed out the window at the silent street, the moonlight catching the Charger's contours in a soft glow. A part of me felt an odd gratitude toward my beloved car. It had drawn Sabrina's attention, but it had also led me to reconnect with an old injustice that deserved to be righted. In the end, I reminded myself, standing up to people like Rory and Sabrina might be risky, but letting them roam free felt worse. The following week, I woke to news that felt like a cannon blast. Detective Ramos had left a voicemail at dawn. "We've made an arrest related to your tip," she said, her tone brimming with urgency. "Please call me back at once." My hands trembled as I listened. An arrest? Had they actually cornered Rory, the hawk Aldridge at last? Heart pounding, I returned the call, nearly stumbling over my words. The detective's phone rang twice before she picked up. "You're up early," Ramos said, sounding both relieved and exhausted. "We raided a private property in Harbor City last night. Found enough evidence to hold Rory Aldridge on suspicion of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy." My breath whooshed out in a messy exhale. "That's incredible. So you caught him?" She paused. "We found him in the guest house, trying to slip out the back. He's in custody." Sabrina Aldridge was there too, and we're determining her level of involvement. For now, she's been detained but not formally charged. The words rang like a bell in my head. Sabrina was detained. The woman who'd threatened me so viciously had finally faced a dose of reality. Part of me wanted to cheer for karma, but I kept my voice steady. "What does this mean for the case?" "We're still digging through financial records," Ramos explained. Rory's operation was extensive. The biggest break, though, was linking him to events like that charity gala. Your tip about the photos verified his presence in the state, something we hadn't confirmed until now. A wave of relief mingled with a flicker of pride. "So that's it, then. He's really being brought to justice." "He'll face serious charges," she confirmed. "We might need you to testify about your knowledge of his past dealings, especially if he tries to deny certain aspects of his scheme. That is, if you're comfortable with that." I swallowed hard. Testifying meant stepping forward publicly, shining a spotlight on myself as a key witness. But I couldn't shirk the responsibility. I'd come this far. "I'll do whatever I can to help," I said finally. "Appreciated," Ramos replied. "We'll be in touch." When I ended the call, I sat there on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, pulse thudding in my ears. It was almost surreal to think how a routine trip to the fuel station had led to this. Sabrina's attempt to paint me as a criminal had inadvertently revealed her own secrets instead. And Rory, the slippery con man from my college days, was finally behind bars, or at least a holding cell. Stepping outside, I found the sky a gentle blue, the morning air still crisp. My 1969 Charger gleamed in the driveway, innocent of the storm it had set in motion. As I brushed a speck of dust off the hood, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, fate works in unexpected ways, and sometimes, the people who think they're invincible learn the hard way that no one is truly above the law. A few days after the raid, I scrolled through local news on my phone, my coffee cup steaming by my side. The headline jumped out immediately: "Financier arrested in major fraud case, spouse also detained." I tapped the link, heart pounding. The article featured a mugshot of Rory Aldridge, looking far less smug than in the charity gala photos. The text detailed his suspected involvement in a sprawling investment scam, one that had defrauded numerous victims across several states. Investigators believed he'd been funneling money through shell corporations for years, with bribes and forged paperwork hiding the trail. Next to Rory's grim face was a snapshot of Sabrina Aldrich, disheveled and wide-eyed. The piece noted she hadn't been formally charged yet but was being held on suspicion of aiding and abetting. The police were still gathering evidence to confirm her role. I took a long sip of coffee, a slow, satisfying sense of relief flooding me. While I didn't wish misery on anyone, seeing justice served, especially for someone who tormented me at that gas station, felt vindicating. The story confirmed that tips from an unnamed source had helped law enforcement pinpoint Rory's location. For safety reasons, I was grateful the article didn't mention my name. Setting my phone down, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Though the road ahead would be long for the legal process, the fact that both of them were in custody marked a victory. They wouldn't be so quick to scheme or threaten innocent people anymore. Just as I refocused on my work for the day, my phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number. The sight of it made my stomach twist, my mind flashed to Sabrina's threats. But I braced myself and read it. You might think you've won, but this isn't over. S.A. For a heartbeat, cold dread trickled through me. Had Sabrina somehow found a way to send messages from jail or while out on bail? Or was someone else using her initials to rattle me? I drew a deep breath, deciding not to respond. The best way to handle intimidation was to record it and alert Detective Ramos if necessary. I snapped a screenshot of the text, saving it in a folder labeled Evidence. Then I blocked the number and reminded myself that Sabrina's threats were losing their power. The legal system was unraveling her and Rory's schemes piece by piece. Later, to clear my head, I took my charger for a spin through winding back roads, letting the sun and wind wash away lingering tension. The engine's growl felt triumphant, like it was reminding me how far we'd come from that day at Frontier Fuel Station. Though the threat wasn't entirely gone, I had faith that truth would keep surfacing, no matter how many times Sabrina tried to bury it. A week slipped by in a flurry of everyday tasks. Despite the simmering drama, I still had a life to lead, projects to finish, errands to run, and friends to catch up with. Every so often, I found myself glancing over my shoulder in crowded places, a habit formed from Sabrina's warning calls. But so far, there'd been no direct confrontation. Then, late on a Thursday evening, Detective Ramos reached out again. "We've compiled a substantial amount of evidence against Rory Aldrich," she said. "I'm calling to request your official statement about the early run-in you had in college and anything you learned back then." My stomach clenched with a mix of nerves and resolve. "I'll cooperate fully. Do I need to come down to the station?" "It would be helpful. We'll have a clerk transcribe everything, and if you're willing, you can sign an affidavit confirming your testimony." "Of course," I replied, voice steady. "Let me know when." She rattled off a time slot for the following afternoon. I cleared my calendar, deciding it was worth missing a day of work to see this through. After ending the call, I sank onto my couch, exhaling. This step made it real. I was actively participating in bringing Rory to justice, and by extension, Sabrina too. The next day, the station's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as a receptionist led me to a small interrogation room. Detective Ramos greeted me with a respectful nod, offering a glass of water. We sat at a utilitarian metal table, a stack of folders at one corner. "All right, Ethan," she began. "Start from the beginning, back at your college. Tell me every interaction you recall with Rory, especially any that hint at illegal or fraudulent behavior." I recounted the memory of Rory's flashy, business proposals, how he tried to enlist me in a bogus investment ring, and how I'd reported him to campus administration upon discovering he'd falsified records. Ramos took notes, occasionally pausing to clarify a date or detail. Once I finished, she flipped through a few pages in her folder. "That aligns with some intel we gathered," she murmured. "He used multiple aliases at different campuses. You might have helped confirm the earliest timeline of his scams." I leaned back, tension easing from my shoulders. I'm glad it's useful. Before she let me go, Ramos leaned forward, voice dropping a notch. Between you and me, Sabrina Aldridge might not be just an accessory. We suspect she helped launder funds through her family's networks. We won't know for sure until we follow the money trail. A ripple of grim satisfaction coursed through me. After everything, her arrogance, her threats, Sabrina stood to face a reality check. I thought about the text I'd received, threatening me even after her arrest. She might still be in denial, or perhaps out on a temporary release. Keep me posted if you can, I said softly. She nodded. Thank you for coming in. Walking out of that station, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Lives were about to be upended, Sabrina, Rory, who knew how many of his unsuspecting investors. But sometimes, that's the cost of exposing the truth. Justice, however messy, was finally catching up with them. Things unfolded quickly in the weeks that followed. The regional news stations were flooded with coverage of the Aldridge fraud case, and nearly every broadcast displayed Rory's and Sabrina's faces as fresh details emerged. Bank accounts were frozen, more victims came forward, and talk of federal charges loomed on the horizon. It was bigger than I'd ever imagined. Amidst the headlines, I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. My 1969 Charger remained my sanctuary. I'd take late-night drives to clear my head, reflecting on how a single gas station encounter had triggered this cascade. Each time I stepped out of the driver's seat, I was reminded of how life can pivot on a moment. One evening, as I was flipping through channels, my phone buzzed with a call from Detective Ramos. I picked up, anticipation spiking. Good news, she said, an undercurrent of triumph in her voice. We're coordinating with federal authorities. Rory faces multiple counts of fraud, and Sabrina is likely going to be indicted as a co-conspirator. A wave of complicated relief swept through me. She always acted like she was untouchable. Not anymore, Ramos replied. Her name was on key documents, forging signatories for Rory's deals. They left an electronic trail a mile wide. I thanked her and ended the call, leaning against the kitchen counter. A swirl of emotions surfaced, satisfaction, caution, even a tinge of sadness for everyone misled by Rory's promises. Yet, I couldn't deny the sense of vindication. This was the final blow that Sabrina, with all her arrogance, never saw coming. An hour later, another call lit up my screen, an unknown number. My pulse tripped. I debated letting it ring out, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? I ventured. A silence, then a ragged sigh. You think you've won? It was Sabrina's voice, subdued, missing its previous venomous edge. She sounded tired, on the brink of tears. You ruined us. I gripped the phone. You and Rory did that yourselves, I said softly. I just shined a light on it. She exhaled shakily, a hollow laugh. Rory always said we were above consequence. We had money, lawyers, connections. He convinced me we could handle anything. That's not how the law works, I murmured. Or reality. A pause. Then she whispered, for what it's worth, I'm sorry, about the gas station, about everything. Her voice cracked, and the line went dead. I stood there, phone still clutched in my hand, unsure what to feel. Perhaps her regret was genuine, perhaps it was just desperation. Either way, the wheels of justice were turning, and she couldn't stop them now. Days later, news broke of a formal federal indictment. Rory, the hawk Aldridge faced decades in prison. Sabrina had negotiated some form of plea deal, though details remained sealed. I watched the coverage quietly, reflecting on how one day's conflict at a lonely fuel stop had sparked a chain of events that brought down an entire criminal enterprise. In the end, the world kept spinning. And when I turned the key in my Charger's ignition, I realized I could finally drive without that residual weight on my chest. The road ahead was open, my conscience clear, and the two who had tried to destroy my peace were now answering to the law.